Hello, what's up everyone? Welcome back. This is part 2 of creating Muzzle Flash using VFX Graph. So, a quick recap of what we did in the last video. We downloaded the free VFX flipbooks from Unity. We created a Muzzle Flash and a smoke and the shell ejection here, these shells. And then we created smoke and heat coming out of the barrel. There's like heat and smoke coming out of the barrel here. And we also added a property for the fire rate so that we can customize its fire rate. In this video we're going to add more properties to the graph so that we can customize it for all sorts of weapons. Before we do that, there are a few things that I should have done in the last video, but I kind of forgot, so let's get to those first. So the first thing is the smoke. So we're using an 8x8 grid of textures, but I kind of forgot to animate them. You can see that the particles are not animated. So to animate it, simply add a flipbook player in the update context. And now, as you can see, this smoke is animated. Decrease the frame rate, so to make it a little slower, set the alpha back to be like 45 and 30 or something. And the same thing for our muzzle flash. As you can see, it's only using the first texture in that flipbook. We can just set the index of our texture randomly in the initialized context. So set texture index random, and then we go from the index of 0 to 8 times 8, which is 64. And now, as you can see, the textures are less repetitive. Our muzzle flash is now less repetitive. So another thing we should do, the shell smoke here. I realized that whenever we want to move it a little bit, I have to change the velocity to be like this, and I also have to change the position. One way to make it easier for us to edit this is setting its pivot so that we don't have to set the position or adjust it every time. So set pivot, and let's set this position to be like 0, 0 here. And as you can see now, the smoke is coming from here, so we should and this is the y-axis of our particle, so we should increase it on the y or decrease it actually. And now, as you can see, if I change this velocity, we no more have to adjust the position. You can see that these shells are still like rotating even though we have paused the graph. That's because I added this add angle random in the update context. So what we can do instead is we can add angle in the update. We're going to multiply this to the delta time so that whenever the graph is paused, the rotation of our shells would also be 0. So here we can add delta time, and we can use the VFX delta time, and we're going to multiply these two. And we multiply it with this float, and we can plug it into the angle, and it will convert it into a vector 3 for us. So if I set this to like 900, you can see that they no more rotate. Pretty cool, right? So in order to be able to use this same graph for different weapons, we need to be able to uh, assign a different shell mesh and adjust the position and the direction of the shells. So to do that, we can add properties. So here in our graph, we're going to expose everything. Here's our shell, and this is the output of our shell, and it uses that mesh here and the texture. So let's add a mesh. Let's call it shell, and a texture 2D. Call it shell texture. I'm going to assign this mesh and the texture to be the default value of these properties, and then we're going to plug them into the mesh and the texture. Then we can customize it from the inspector. Also, let's set size here, and by default it's 0.1, and it may be too small for some meshes, so we're going to expose this one as well. Let's create a float and call it shell size. We're also going to expose this position for our shell, so let's add a vector 3 shell position. We're going to give it a default value, and then we're going to plug it into the set position. Also, for the direction, we're going to expose this set velocity random. So it has two vectors, so I'm going to create two vector 3 velocity, minimum velocity, or we can say min velocity, and we can create another one and call it shell maximum velocity. We can use these as the default values again, so and we're going to plug it into these. So as you can see, I got a shotgun here, and we're going to use the same graph, drag and drop it here. And let's drag our muzzle flash under our shotgun. So let's put it under our shotgun and reset its position. We are going to align it to our barrel. So in the properties, we can increase the fire rate, which I should have called fire delay. Here is our slug. Let me plug it into the shell. And for the texture, we're going to assign the texture. And now, as you can see, we have this shotgun slug coming out of the shotguns. The default size is 1. We can make it like 0.8 or like 0.7 maybe. And for the position, we're going to move it to somewhere there. As you can see, our shell smoke is still coming out from there. That's because I forgot to use the position for that. Here we set position. Let's drag the shell position and plug it into this as well. And for the velocity, we can add another property. So let's add another property. Shell smoke direction goes to the right, and it also goes upwards a little, so those can be the default values. So as you can see, our smoke is spawning with a constant spawn rate. So even if our fire delays like 5 seconds, you can see that the smoke is still coming out of the barrel, even though we only have one shot every 5 seconds. We're going to use GPU events. So here in the update context of our muzzle flash, we're going to add an event. So we can use always, on die, or rate. I'm going to use rate, and here in our smoke, I'm going to delete this spawn context on our smoke, and instead we're going to use this event to spawn our smoke. So here's a GPU event, and we're going to plug this into the initialize. And now, as you can see, whenever we have a shot, the smoke is spawned, and when we don't have any muzzle flash, we also don't have any smoke. And we can actually increase this a little bit, making it like, I don't know, 15. So if you pay attention, you can see that the shell is ejected in the wrong angle from our shotguns. We can add another property for the angle of the shell. So shell angle is going to have a default value of 90 in the X, and we're going to plug it into the set angle. So now in our shotgun we can set this X to be 0, and it will spawn with the right angle, as you can see. Okay, so since this is a shotgun, I'm going to add some sparkles coming out of the barrel. So let's add a system simple swarm particle system, and we're going to get rid of the shape. So let's remove the sphere, and instead we're going to add a AA box. So set position shape AA box, and let's set it to volume, and we're going to scale it down to be like only from the barrel. So let's set it to 0.01 and like 0.05 there. So it's coming out like just from here. And let's also get rid of the constant spawn rate, and instead let's add a periodic burst. And let's duplicate this fire rate property, and we're going to plug it into this, and let's spawn 10 particles each time. So every time it spawns 10 particles. And now let's set some random velocity here, and let's give it minus 0.3, minus 0.3 to 0.3 on the X and Y, and on the Z let's give it something like 1 to 5, so that as you can see they kind of fly out that way. And let's give it a gravity so that it also kind of starts falling down. Well, this is too much, so let's decrease it to, or increase it, or whatever. Let's set it to like -1. And we don't want it to have a long lifetime, so let's also decrease the random lifetime to be from 0.2 to 0.6. So it kind of disappears here, as you can see. Let's go here and set this scale on the X to 0.05, and on the Y we're going to change the bit range to go from 0 to 1, and we're going to bring it up here a little bit. Let's position it a little bit like here, so it's coming out of the barrel, like from there. And also let's set the pivot to be from the very end of it. Set pivot, and we're going to set its pivot on the Y to be 0.6 or something. And we can let's tweak this color as well. So we don't want it to be like invisible from the beginning, so let's delete this key and let it to be at full alpha from the beginning. And let's make it a little more reddish from the beginning, and also let's increase its intensity to, like, I don't know, 13 or something. I want it to be like really bright, and towards the end we want to make it cold, so let's make it like blue towards the end. Yeah, something like that. Actually, I think 12 is a little too much. Let's go with 10 maybe. And we don't really need this turbulence. I think we're going to get rid of this. Alright, so we want this shotgun to have sparkles, but we don't want this SMG to have sparkles. So let's add a boolean, so a bool, and we're going to call this sparks, and let's drag it here, and let's plug it into a branch. And here, if it's true, we're going to spawn 10 of these sparks. If it's false, then we're going to spawn 0. So as you can see now, they don't have sparks by default, but if I select the muzzle flash and the shotgun and I enable the sparks, it will have sparks. Pretty cool, right? Alright, so let's also make the smoke that comes out of the barrel more visible. So like right now you don't see it that much. It is visible, but it's like not that much noticeable. Let's add a flipbook player, and let's increase the frame rate to like 250. It's too small, so let's set size here, set size, and by default it's 0.1, so let's make this 0.3, and now it's more visible. As you can see here, as you can see, it's more visible, but its lifetime is not enough for us to see it. You can see it disappears too quickly, so let's add lifetime. Let's instead of setting a random alpha, let's set alpha over lifetimes. And let's add a key here and make it look something like this. So let's also customize the shape of our muzzle flash and create an M4 style star shaped muzzle flash. And the way we're going to do that is by using a mesh. So let's open Blender here, and let's delete everything, and let's add a plane. Rotate it 90 degrees that way. Tab into edit mode and scale it down a little and move it up like there, and something like this. And let's duplicate it and rotate it around the Y or around the Z if you're thinking like in Unity. So let's create a star. So let's select all of these and Control J to join them all together. And then we're going to select only the outer vertices, and let's move them a little forward, something like this, because that's how star-shaped muzzle flashes are. They're not like totally flat. Let's subdivide them like a couple of times because we need more geometry, and also let's extrude it. So something like this. Scale it down. So let's scale it like this much. I don't know. Here's our mesh in Unity, and we're going to go visual effects, utilities, point cache, bake tool, and we're going to use this mesh to create a point cache. So to select my muzzle flash example folder, and I'm going to save the point cache. So this point cache has a normal and a position, and we're going to use this position to spawn muzzle flash. Let's copy this muzzle flash system, paste it up here, and instead of setting position with this AA box, we're going to set position from map. And the map is going to be the position of our star position. So if we output to a simple default particle, we can see the shape of it better. So as you can see, it's spawning particles. It's probably too small. If we increase its size, you can see that it looks like a star. Let me increase the count, our spawn count, to something like 70. And as you can see, it looks like a star. If I disable the main muzzle flash here, you can see it looks like a star. Alright, so I think something like 7 is the right size. So let's set 7, 7, 7, or like 15 maybe. Let's get rid of this trigger event. Also, we don't need the set index. We can only use the first particle texture here. So let's output to this muzzle flash, and holy crap, it's too big. So let's also get rid of the set size over life, and instead let's give it a set size 0.2. 0.2 kind of looks good, but you can see there's like a lot of empty spots there. And if we increase the capacity and the count, you can see those empty spots will get filled with these particles. So something like 75 particles I think is good enough. So yeah, something like that. I think it's a little too big, so let's make it smaller. Something like this is more like it. And here's our star-shaped muzzle flash. Alright, let's also add a boolean for star shape. And just like we did with the sparkles, we're going to plug it into a branch. If this is true, we're going to spawn 70 particles. If not, we're going to spawn 0. So now as you can see, it's a simple muzzle flash, but if I check the star shaped, it will look like it will become a star shaped muzzle flash. Alright, let's add light and audio to this muzzle flash. So I have imported this audio file and we're going to add some light to this. So I'm going to create an empty child for my muzzle flash and let's call it light. And under this I'm going to add point light. And I'm going to bring it to its left and I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to bring it to its right. I'm going to make the temperature to be hot and I'm going to make its color to be like an orange, like that. And I'm going to increase its intensity a little bit and I'm going to decrease its range so that it looks something like this. If we toggle them on and off, you can see that it's actually a little too reddish, so let me make it more like that. So I'm going to disable this game object and we're going to toggle it on and off using a script. So let's create a C# script and let's call it muzzle flash VFX. And I'm going to assign it to the muzzle flash game object. My ID is gonna take forever to load, so let's just edit it using this. So we're going to access this fire rate property, which actually I'm going to rename it to fire delay because that makes more sense. So we're gonna be using Unity engine.vfx and then we're going to have a reference to the VFX graph. So private visual effect, let's call it muzzle VFX, and we're going to have a float variable, call it fire delay, and then in our start method we're going to say muzzle VFX is equal to get component visual effect, and our fire delay is equal to muzzle VFX dot get float, and the name of our property is now fire delay. And then we need a reference to the light sources, so a game object, let's call it light, and the light game object was the first child of this game object, so transform dot get child, the first index dot game object. And then we can create a coroutine that will toggle it on and off. So private IE numerator, let's call it fire, and we're going to start it from our start method. So start coroutine fire, and in here we're going to say light dot set active true, and then we're going to yield return new wait for seconds, and we're going to wait for 0.1 seconds because that's the lifetime of our muzzle flash. And then we're going to disable our light, so set active false, and then we're going to wait for the fire delay minus 0.1. So let's say fire delay minus equals to 0.1, and then we're going to say wait for fire delay. And for this to repeat, we're going to put this in a loop. So while true, we do this. Now, as you can see, our light is flickering with the same fire rate of our muzzle flash. Now let's add the audio source to this muzzle flash game object as well, and let's turn off the play on awake because we're going to play that through script as well. So we're gonna need another reference, so a reference to an audio source. Let's call it audio, and audio is going to equal to get component audio source. And then here, after we set our light to be active, we're going to say audio.play. And if you change the fire delay, so as you can see, the audio plays respective to the fire delay as well. So another thing we can do is adjust the position of this collision plane through script. So here we set the position of our plane to be 2 meters below the muzzle flash. So we can add a float, a property, and let's call it height. And we can give it 2 meters for the default value. And then we can multiply it with -1 to make it negative. And we can plug it into the y value of our plane's position. Now all we have to do is do a raycast and change the height to be the distance of our raycast. So let's do a ray equals to new ray, which starts from the transform.position of our muzzle flash, and we want to go downward, so minus transform.up. Let's also add a raycast hit and call it hit, and let's do the raycast. So if physics dot raycast with ray out hit, and in here we're going to say muzzle VFX dot set float, and the name of our property was height, so height is going to be hit dot distance. So as you can see, the shells are colliding here, and if I move this muzzle flash closer to the floor, you can see they're still colliding with this floor because it has a collider. And if I move it up here, you can see that even though it's like higher than 2 meters, it's still going to collide with this floor. And this should actually wrap it up. Let me know if you want to see a part 3 of this, and you can grab this project from my Patreon. And thanks for watching, and until next time, peace out.